They say the truth will set you free. But what if finding it means losing everything you thought you were? Right now, in one of the most scientifically advanced countries on Earth, you can build a rocket, edit a gene, launch a tech empire, but you can't swab your cheek to see where your blood comes from. In Israel, private ancestry testing is restricted, not because they can't do it, because they won't. And that silence, it speaks volumes. Whispers follow it, loud, viral, conspiratorial. They're hiding something, say the headlines no scholar wrote. They're not the real ones. Claim tweets with no footnotes. But beneath the noise, there's a quieter question, a darker one. Not about lies, but about truths, too dangerous to name. Because this isn't just about ancestry. It's about legitimacy, identity, nationhood. What happens if the right to return, the memory of exile, the sacred inheritance of a people, rests not on belief, but on biology? And what if biology doesn't play by scripture? Here's the fear no one dares frame aloud, that a single drop of truth could shatter an entire theology, not by proving someone's a fraud, but by proving that bloodlines bleed into each other. And still, that's not even the deepest terror. The real silence comes from religion itself, from a law older than genetics, but far more cruel. Because in rabbinic tradition, if DNA exposes a forbidden lineage, a child becomes a mamzer, a mark worse than exile, a label that makes marriage impossible, love illegal. This is not just science under censorship. This is identity held hostage by memory. But what if? What if the DNA they fear the most doesn't erase the story, but confirms one far older than they ever imagined? To understand that, we can't look forward. We have to dig back, through myth, through exile, through empire, until we reach the bones buried under Jerusalem itself. And when scientists pulled ancient DNA from those ruins, what they found didn't just whisper of the past. It broke it wide open. The bones didn't lie. Under layers of ancient ash, in the ruins of cities older than scripture, Hazar, Megiddo, Ashkelon, archaeologists found them. Skeletons buried 3,000 years ago. Hands curled, teeth clenched, time frozen mid-scream or prayer. They belonged to the Canaanites. And for centuries, their name was more myth than memory, villains in a holy story. The ones the Israelites were commanded to destroy, wipe out, erase. But here's where history cracks. Because when scientists pulled DNA from those bones and compared it to modern genomes, they found something no one expected. A match, not just with one group, but two. Modern Jewish populations, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Sephardi, carry the Canaanite signal. So do Palestinians. Even some Druze and Samaritans, the so-called enemy of the Bible, is still here, in the blood of both sides. This wasn't conquest. It was continuity. The Israelites didn't arrive in the land. They rose from its soil. The story we were told, about a foreign people sweeping in to take a promised land, doesn't match what the DNA says. The genes don't tell of invasion. They whisper of evolution. The land didn't forget. It remembers every footstep, every migration, every prayer that turned into habit, and every habit that turned into identity. Imagine it, two peoples at war, each claiming to be the rightful heirs, each arguing over graves and gods, never realizing those graves hold their shared grandparents. You can change the language, change the flag, change the name of the border, but your blood doesn't forget where it came from. And the deeper scientists looked, the more the script began to flip. Because if the Israelites didn't arrive from elsewhere, if they emerged from Canaanite towns, if their ancestors were already here, then who were they really? And why? Does everyone want to claim them? They didn't look different. They didn't sound different. But something, somewhere split them. From the ashes of Canaanite towns, two names began to rise. Israel, Judah. Same land, same ancestors. But suddenly two destinies. The kingdom of Israel in the north, powerful and open, absorbing ideas, merging gods. The kingdom of Judah in the south, stricter, smaller, turning inward, toward one temple, one law, one God. It wasn't race that divided them. It wasn't blood. It was belief. And yet, even as their theologies diverged, their DNA didn't. When scientists pulled ancient genomes from Judean burial sites, Jerusalem, Lachish, Samaria, they found a quiet, defiant truth. Mizrahi Jews, Palestinians, some Samaritans, all carrying the same ancient thread, the same families, split not by borders, but by faith. You can change your scripture. You can rewrite the names of your prophets, but you can't outrun your ancestry. It stays, even when exile comes, when Babylon burned the temple, when the Assyrians scattered the tribes, when empires rose and erased the maps. The people didn't vanish. They scattered, but they carried the land in their blood. A father exiled to Babylon, a mother buried in Jerusalem, a child born under Roman rule, still whispering words once spoken in Canaan. And through that scattering, something strange happened. The faith grew stronger. The stories got sharper. The identity began to harden. But what emerged from that trauma, what rose from ruin, was not just a survivor. It was something new. A people no longer tied to place, but to memory, to covenant, to code. And yet, in that transformation, something got lost. Something no DNA test could map. A piece of identity so deeply buried. Even the exiles didn't know they were carrying it. Because exile didn't just scatter bloodlines. It rewrote them. And in that rewrite, a new mystery was born. One that would stretch across continents and come back centuries later as a question whispered in the genes of strangers. The map shattered. The names changed. But somehow, the memory stayed. After Babylon came Persia, then Greece, then Rome. Each time, another piece chipped off, another exile, another border, another home not home. And yet, they didn't disappear. They adapted. From the spice markets of Baghdad to the synagogues of Spain, from the snow-heavy forests of Poland to the sun-baked hills of Morocco, Jewish communities reshaped themselves, learned new languages, new customs, but held one thing constant, a thread, thin, invisible, and unbreakable. DNA doesn't care where you pray. It remembers where your ancestors walked. And so it began, a scattering with structure, a diaspora not of disappearance, but transformation. Ashkenazi Jews in Europe, Sephardi Jews along the Mediterranean, Mizrahi Jews across the Middle East, centuries apart, thousands of miles, but under the microscope, the signal still hums. Levantine, core, undeniable. It's not just in the father lines. Those ancient Y chromosomes passed from patriarch to patriarch. It's in the mothers, the matrilineal pulse. For founding women thousands of years ago, whose genetic fingerprints still echo in kitchens, lullabies, and silent prayers from Warsaw to Aleppo. But exile isn't just movement. It's mutation. Communities grew inward. They became genetic isolates, tight-knit, resilient, shared more DNA with each other than with the people next door. A survival code, a bottlenecked memory. Because to be Jewish in exile meant remembering who you were when the world told you to forget. And yet, as that memory grew stronger, so did the suspicion. How can a people remain ancient when their faces, accents, customs look nothing like the desert they once called home? That's when it began. A whisper, a theory, one that said, maybe they're not who they say they are. And that whisper turned into a war. It started as a theory. Then it became a weapon. A whisper in academic halls turned headline in 1,000 echo chambers. A claim that sounded scientific, but struck like a sword. What if the Jews of Europe weren't Jews at all? What if they didn't descend from ancient Israel, but from a forgotten empire on the steppes of Central Asia? The Khazars, a Turkic kingdom, nomadic, wealthy, and for a time Jewish. Or so the story goes. A conversion, a collapse, a mass migration west. And just like that, a new origin myth was born. Ashkenazi Jews, they said, weren't the children of Jerusalem, but the sons of Kagan kings. Foreigners, imposters, with no ancestral claim to the land they now call home. It caught on, not in journals, but in forums, in pamphlets, in angry tweets, in the mouth of every person who wanted to say, you don't belong here. But here's what the genome said. When the shouting stopped, no Khazar signal, No traceable Turkic imprint. Just the same Near Eastern core found in Mizrahi Jews, Sephardim. And yes, even in Ashkenazim. The same ancient roots. Split by empire. Not invention. The Khazar hypothesis didn't collapse because of opinion. It collapsed under the weight of data. And yet, it still lives. Not in science, but in politics, in agenda. Because sometimes, the truth isn't loud enough to kill a lie. Especially when that lie is useful. Useful to those who want erasure, not coexistence. To those who'd rather replace a people's story than confront its complexity. But here's where it turns. Because while one group was busy fabricating ancestry, another was quietly hiding it. Not to win land, not to build nations, but to protect something even more sacred. Not by the state, by the synagogue. The lies came from outside, but the silence came from within, while the world debated who the Jews really were. Inside Israel, another kind of identity crisis was unfolding. One far more personal, and far more dangerous. Because in this land of open debates and closed secrets, you can order a drone online, but you can't take a private ancestry test. You heard that right. DNA testing, off limits. Not because it's unscientific, but because it's too precise. It's legal, yes, but only through the courts. Only with approval. Only under a judge's eye. To outsiders, it sounds like a cover-up, a hidden truth, a fear of exposing foreign roots. But the real fear is older than the state of Israel itself. It's a word that hasn't left Jewish law for over 2,000 years. Mamzer. It doesn't mean outsider. It doesn't mean convert. It means a child born from forbidden love, from adultery, from incest, from a union the Torah never allowed. And once the label is on you, you wear it for life. You can't marry into the community. You're spiritually cut off, even if your soul burns with faith. So rabbis, guardians of ancient law, fear the test, not because of genetics, but because of what it might reveal. Not ancestry, but impurity. Not foreign blood, but forbidden ones. It's not just a religious problem. It's emotional, social, intimate. Because what happens when the very tool meant to prove your belonging ends up exiling you instead? And while the world points fingers, saying Israel hides its DNA for ethnic reasons, the truth is darker and sadder. It's not nationalism that drives the silence. It's heartbreak. It's panic. It's the dread of seeing your child, your sibling, yourself, declared unfit, not by race, but by law. But here's the twist. That same DNA, it didn't only threaten rabbis, it also revealed something no one expected. Not impurity, not scandal, revolution. The revolution didn't come with protest signs, or ballots, or laws. It came from a cheek swab, from a genome, from a whisper in the blood. Because while rabbis feared what DNA might uncover inside their own communities, something else was surfacing, outside the synagogue, far from the courtrooms. In the DNA of a different people, Palestinians. For decades, the narrative has been set. Two peoples, two histories, one land, one conflict. But the data didn't care about the headlines. It only cared about inheritance. And what it found was silence broken. Iron Age DNA, dug from Judean hills, ancient towns, forgotten tombs. Didn't just match Jewish lineages. It matched Palestinian ones too. Same markers, same regions, same buried ancestors, the children of rival flags, carrying the same ancient genome. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't noise. It was continuity, not of empire, not of migration, but of presence, of people who never left. Even when the names changed, even when the scripts were rewritten, they still carried the imprint of Canaanite roots, of Judean farmers, of Levantine mothers whose mitochondrial DNA still survives in kitchens and lullabies across Gaza, Nablus, and Haifa. It's not just science. It's language. It's the way Arabic and Hebrew share the same bones, the same gutturals, the same rhythm. It's burial rites that look too familiar. It's olive trees planted in the same seasons, bread baked the same way for 2,000 years. And yet the politics turned kinship into opposition. Borders hardened, memory split, and the blood forgot what it used to know. But DNA didn't. It remembered. And in that remembrance was a question too heavy for politics to carry. If enemies share ancestors, what are they fighting over? And just when you think the story couldn't twist further, you realize there are still tribes out there who never forgot, never scattered, never mixed. The ones who stayed sealed in time, while the world argued over bloodlines and borders. Some chose silence, not because they had no history, but because theirs was buried too deep to speak. The Druze, the Samaritans, the Bedouins. 3 names, 3 peoples, 1 land, not divided by flags or by exile, but by a different kind of resistance. They stayed. They didn't conquer. They didn't convert. They preserved. Locked in mountains, in desert camps, in whispered tradition. They became time capsules in flesh. Start with the Samaritans, a tiny community, less than 1,000 souls, but carrying a code older than most countries. When scientists mapped their Y chromosomes, they saw something haunting, a match, not with modern empires, but with the ancient priestly lines of Israel, the Kohanim, the ones said to serve in Solomon's temple. The Samaritans don't just remember the temple. They share blood with the ones who built it. Then the Druze, a people who emerged in the 11th century, but whose DNA doesn't belong to that century, or the one before it. Their genome is Levantine, almost untouched, a near-perfect echo of the ancient Near East. They didn't mix. They didn't migrate. They married only among themselves. Year after year, century after century. Their genes are a library, not of stories, but of stasis. And finally, the Bedouins, wanderers, traders, guardians of the desert. Their DNA tells a different tale, not of purity, but of fusion. Arabian strands woven into Canaanite ones, nomadic roots that stretch across both Sinai and Judea. They didn't isolate. They adapted, moved, blended, survived. These groups didn't inherit myths. They inherited memory. They wear ancestry like skin, unspoken but undeniable. Their blood didn't travel far, so their history never got rewritten. But even that kind of truth can be dangerous, because DNA, once decoded, can heal identity, or it can be turned into a weapon. Truth isn't always enough, because even in a land where blood carries memory, someone will still pick up that memory and sharpen it into a weapon. The moment DNA entered the conversation, it stopped being science. It became war. One side said, "This proves we belong." The other said, "This proves you never did." The genome, once a quiet witness to shared ancestry, was dragged into a courtroom of politics and told to pick a side. You've seen the headlines, heard the claims. 97.5% of Jews have no Hebrew DNA. Palestinians are the real Semites. European Jews are imposters. None of it peer-reviewed. None of it true. But viral? Explosive? Emotionally perfect? Yes. The irony. The very same DNA that showed continuity was now being twisted to prove rupture. Studies cherry-picked. Graphs cropped. Quotes stripped of context and thrown like fire. Activists turned researchers into soldiers. Scholars were dragged into battles they never agreed to fight. One finding could be weaponized in 2 directions, used to justify return or deny existence. It didn't matter what the full study said, only the part that fit the agenda. And the scientists, caught in the middle, knowing their data had become political currency. Each truth flattened, each nuance erased. Because in identity wars, subtlety doesn't trend. Certainty does. And certainty doesn't care what the genome actually says. It only cares who gets to claim the land, the legacy, the name. But underneath all the noise, beneath the propaganda and pressure, the DNA kept whispering something else. Something neither side was ready to hear. Not a narrative, a signal. One thread that refused to break, refused to lie. And that thread still leads somewhere, straight into the heart of a truth we thought we buried. Through all the noise, through meth, exile, empire, and war, one truth kept breathing. A quiet signal, deeper than language, older than politics. Shared, Not identical, but undeniable. Jews, Palestinians, Druze, Samaritans, raised under different banners, praying in different tongues, grieving in different graves. Yet beneath it all, the same soil, the same blood, not metaphor, not poetry, genome, coded proof that this conflict didn't start with difference, but with division, artificial, recent, fragile, because the borders drawn on paper don't match the lines etched in the DNA. They say identity is who you fight for. But what if it's also who you've forgotten? What if your enemy was your cousin? What if the face you've grown to hate carries the same mitochondrial echo as your grandmother? This isn't a call for peace. DNA can't solve politics, but it can shatter lies. It can show you that you've been split from yourself. Maybe this conflict was never really about land. Maybe it was about memory, the kind passed down silently, in rituals and recipes, in scars that never fully heal. And now, that memory has a voice. It speaks in chromosomes, and it refuses to forget. So before you draw another line, before you build another wall, ask yourself, what if the people you fear most are the ones keeping your history alive? What if exile didn't erase the past, but scattered its pieces across enemy lines? What if the key to your identity lives in someone else's name? If this made you pause, good, because this story is just beginning. Subscribe for more untold stories of identity, exile, and genetic truth. Next time, we go after the tribes the world gave up on, the ones lost to history, or so we thought, until their DNA showed up in the most unexpected place.